Welcome to Marrow Masters Season 13, brought to you by the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link and sponsored by Sanofi. The NBMT Link, established in 1992, strives to help patients, caregivers, and families cope with the psychosocial challenges of bone marrow and stem cell transplant, from diagnosis through survivorship. This season, we'll be focusing on the side effects of bone marrow and stem cell transplant, including GVHD. Here's your host, Executive Director of the NBMT Link, Peggy Burkhardt.
Hello, everyone. So today we have with us Beth Ades of Iowa. So Beth was diagnosed with MDS in 2021, and she is going to share more about her story. Welcome, Beth. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here, Peggy.
Well, we are really thrilled to have you. So Beth, let's get started. Why don't you take us back to your diagnosis and transplant story?
It was Monday, May 17th, 2021, and I went into the doctor because I had been having bruises on my legs. I couldn't remember getting bumped or injuring my legs whatsoever, and the bruises weren't going away. It was a Monday morning, and my doctor decided to run a full CBC blood work on me.
Okay.
I went back to work, and later in the afternoon, she called and said, "Beth, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but your platelets are critically low, and I need you to go to a nearby hospital, a larger hospital. I have a spot reserved for you in the emergency room. You'll be spending the night, and in the morning, you'll be having a bone marrow biopsy."
Oh, wow.
First of all, I didn't know what platelets even were, and I said, "Oh, but I feel fine, doctor. And my daughter has her first softball game and her arts festival tonight, so whatever test you need me, I'll just go tomorrow." And she said, "Beth, I need to stop you right here. What I'm telling you is that if you have a driver right now who can take you, you don't need to go by ambulance." And so that stopped me. And I was in sheer panic. I didn't know what any of this meant. So my husband rushed to pick me up, and we drove the almost hour to the nearby hospital and got checked in. And I spent the night and had my first bone marrow biopsy the very next morning. But the results of the bone marrow biopsy were inconclusive. They didn't point to any one thing. So we started with more and more testing. And during that time, not only did my platelets keep dropping, then other parts of my blood were dropping. So my red blood count, my white blood count, my hemoglobin, all of those were dropping, which started then requiring me to get platelet transfusions and blood transfusions.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a conversation that I had with my dad so distinctly. He's a physician, and it was about 2 weeks after the first initial that something was wrong. And my dad said, "You know, Beth, doctors are some of the smartest people in the world, and hematologists are some of the smartest doctors. And there's a chance that they might not ever figure out what's going on with you." So he explained that there's all these different blood cancers and blood diseases. And he made a reference to this large wall that all of these cancers and diseases could be. And he said, with each test, they're narrowing their search just a tiny little bit to really hone in on what's going on. And I think my response was something like, "Oh, it's been 2 weeks. It's been forever. I'm sure they're going to figure out any moment now what's going on with me." But that wasn't the case. So my doctors in Iowa soon referred me up to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which is about 2.5 hours away from my home.
Okay.
And I met with a few different doctors and departments there and teams. And at 7 months, I got the diagnosis of MDS, or Myelodysplastic Syndrome.
Wow. So it took 7 months to diagnose you, huh?
It did take 7 months.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that was a very lonely and scary time for me. And it was filled with emergency rooms and hospitalizations and transfusions all during the time. So honestly, when I got the diagnosis, it was a relief. It was like, oh, finally, there's a name to it.
Answers.
Yes. And so after it was like, okay, there's a name. Now what? Now what do we do? And my doctor said, well, your only chance at survival is a bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
They tested both my sisters. I have 2 sisters. One was a match. The other was a half match. And then they also started the worldwide search. They found a perfect 10 out of 10 match in Germany. She was a 19-year-old, and she said yes and donated her stem cells.
Oh, that's amazing. Have you had the chance to meet her yet?
Not yet. We found each other's information out at 2 years. And so we email all the time. I would say maybe at least once a week. Actually, as we're recording this, today is her birthday. So she's turning 22 today. And we have plans to meet, but there's a lot of logistics that go along with that. But I'm certain someday it will happen.
Oh, my goodness. Well, happy birthday to your donor. This is incredible.
Thank you.
I am guessing you two are going to meet.
I definitely hope so. I want her to meet me and my husband and my daughter and just see what she has done. And also, it's changed her life. She's in college.
Okay.
And she's going into medicine.
Oh.
And she's been giving speeches at her college about getting on the registry. And so it's had a huge impact in her life and her family's life also.
Wow. Was she always going into medicine?
I don't know that for sure, but she said that she definitely felt the passion for it now. And she's actually part of her clinicals are through graft versus host disease patients. So she's been seeing firsthand what some transplant patients have been experiencing.
Oh, this is incredible. Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. We don't talk about the donors enough sometimes. So I think it's such a great shout out, and it's so important to remember that they're giving the gift of life. This is great. I want to hear more about your donor in the months to come and keep us posted on that. Okay, Beth, maybe we'll have her on the show sometime. That would be really neat.
That would be awesome.
Or maybe both of you together.
We'll be there.
Great, great. Okay, so Beth, we're going to move on. This season's all about the side effects of transplant. So share with us some of the difficulties that you had. What are some of the areas that you struggled when you got home?
So mucositis is something that I struggled with. And I do remember my transplant team telling me about mucositis. And I remember my initial thoughts were thinking, oh, that sounds uncomfortable, mouth sores.
Mm-hmm.
But I am here to tell you it is so much more than mouth sores. It literally starts at your lips and runs all the way through your GI tract. So even after my conditioning and my transplant, I was released for about 1 week, and then I was re-hospitalized for 1 week with mucositis.
But you got through it, and is it a problem anymore?
It is not, no.
Oh, good.
It did heal up. It did take some time, but, luckily, as soon as it was to the point where I thought I need to talk to my transplant team and tell them about this, they admitted me right away, which was really the best thing we could have done because we tackled it right away. So
again, that importance of nipping these things early, it's a common theme throughout the season. So Beth, the first 100 days, I am so intrigued by this. You mentioned the wisdom of a social worker. So let's talk about that.
Sure. My first 100 days, I lived in Minnesota. So I was in another state. And luckily, my mom lived with me during the week. And then it was a change of guards. My husband took care of me during the weekend. So I had wonderful caretakers. But it was extremely difficult. I didn't see my daughter throughout that whole time for those 100 days.
Oh.
So I was very excited to come home. And we had wonderful social workers. And one of them told me, Beth, you're about to go out into a world that's figured out how to get along without you.
Mm.
And that was really hard to hear, but I did need to hear it because when you're in transplant, after transplant, you're so consumed with everything that you need to do, lab work, doctor appointments, transfusions, infusions. You're doing every single thing that the doctors want you to do. It is 100% your life. It's almost like a whole different world that you're living in for those 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my doctor said, yep, you're well enough to go home, congratulations, I came home and I realized that everyone else's lives continued on because they have to. That's the way that it goes. But I felt like mine had stopped. So for me, it was a transition period to feel like I was rejoining basically the land of the living. And I hope that other listeners can know that that's okay. If they're experiencing that same thing where you feel like my life has stopped and everyone else's had continued, that's completely normal from what I experienced.
What a great reminder for people so that they don't feel alone in that. I'm just imagining how your daughter felt when she saw you. That must have just been the best. How old is your daughter?
Now she's 15, so she was 13 at time of transplant. And I did get a weekend release to come home over Mother's Day.
Oh, good.
And that was Oh, that was so special. That was the best Mother's Day ever.
And it probably will always be the best Mother's Day ever, I'm sure.
Agreed. Yes.
Oh, Beth, I love your energy. Thank you so much. So you did struggle with some graft versus host disease. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
How has that been for you?
So I've had both acute and chronic GVHD. So I had acute GVHD in my liver and on my skin. But again, it was telling my doctors right away, hey, I have a little rash with bumps on my legs, and they got me into a specialist right away who got me on treatment. So we did nip that right away. However, the liver, it lingered for a bit, which also delays getting off the anti-rejection medicine, which also delays being able to get your vaccines. So it was at 18 months when I started getting my vaccines. And actually, last week, I just completed the last of my series for vaccines. So we celebrated hard with getting those vaccines. So as far as acute, that's where it stopped. But I do have chronic GVHD in my eyes.
Okay.
The oil glands in my eyelids have stopped working, but I've worked with my GVHD ophthalmologist and we have a really great plan. But I have to tell you that if I even miss one of my treatments, my eyes let me know it. So it is definitely probably going to be a lifelong issue, but it's manageable.
We hear that often. You're not alone in that. It's very common. So Beth, when I met you, oh, I love this. You had talked about this need to pay it forward. We do hear this often. And your village of support, will you address that for us, please?
Of course. So for the first time in my adult life, I was on the receiving end of help. And I needed help with everything from chores and groceries to blood and everything and stem cells. And I've really felt a lot of guilt with that. I just felt like I had put so many other people out or put hardships on them. And so when I got home after my 100 days and I started feeling better, I really felt like, oh, I just need to pay people back. And I was wearing myself out trying to do that and trying to think of different ways to do that. So I needed to shift my focus and pay it forward rather than paying anyone back. And we've done lots of different ways to help pay it forward. So on my first rebirthday and my second, I hosted a blood drive with a bone marrow registry event. So that was really, really rewarding to be able to do that to help all those others. You know, I needed more than 70 transfusions. And I know that there's a huge need and shortage of blood. And so to be able to live long enough and to celebrate that and help the next person that needs the blood was really special to me. Also, my husband just signed up to be a courier with the NMDP. So that means that he will physically transport the transplants whenever and wherever he's needed. So that training will be sometime later this year, but he loves to travel. And so this is a wonderful fit for him.
Oh, wonderful.
And another thing that we're doing is my husband drives a race car as a hobby. And so this year we decided to do a tribute car to both LifeServe, who is the blood donation centers in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, and also to the NMDP, because without all of these people, I wouldn't be here today. So we are just trying to raise awareness and educate people with things that we're already passionate about, like racing. So the car actually just got done and we're ready to get it on the track very soon.
Oh, I love this. We're going to have a picture of that car somehow in the show notes or a link so that people can check it out. Wow. And as far as the courier goes, I know someone that does that and it is super rewarding. She's done it several times. I've actually thought maybe someday I would like to do that. I think it is just an incredible gift to do that for someone and to be on that plane with those cells. You'll have to, maybe your husband could share with us after he's got a few under his belt, what that experience is like.
Oh, he would be happy to. He's so excited to start this. And it was something that I didn't realize that was done for me, that every single transplant, as it's being flown, that someone is physically holding on to that for you, which is incredible. And I hope someday I can find out and maybe meet my courier for my stem cells.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what a great idea. Oh, this is terrific.
There's literally been hundreds of people that have helped me live to today, between the doctors, nurses, hospital staff, insurance angels, other transplant patients, my family, my friends, all the community, everyone behind the scenes that makes it run smoothly. I want to say a huge thank you because it does take a huge village.
That is for sure. So much good in the world, the ripple effect. We sure need that these days. Could you share with listeners what you strive to do post-transplant?
Sure. Oh, the ripple effect. I'm so inspired when I learn of someone who decided to donate blood for the first time, or those that have shared with me that they joined the bone marrow registry. A friend of mine just donated her hair. Another is crocheting hats for cancer patients. And I just think about the ripple effect. So many of the times after we do something positive or volunteer, we don't hear about the person that receives it. And so there's a huge ripple effect, I believe, with any good that we do. And I just feel that there is so much good in the world.
Oh, Beth, you are a burst of inspiration today. I think we all need this, and we so appreciate you, Beth. So, Beth, I want to hear more about pearls. This is an interesting thought. I never knew this. Share, please.
Well, Peggy, you asked me for my pearls of wisdom, and I just had to literally take it to pearls. So I am pretty much obsessed with pearls ever since my first pearl party in the 5th grade. But now for the first time, I feel like I really understand them. An oyster that has not been wounded does not produce pearls. And a pearl is actually a healed wound. So I feel like this is so representative in the transplant world. You know, that grit that forms its way into a pearl. The transplant patients, we are all made up of that grit. Whether we knew that we had it in us or not, we definitely do. And so now we get to enjoy that pearl after transplant, which is this gift, this life that we've been blessed with.
Oh, that is terrific. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that, and I learned something new. So, Beth, tell us how life is different today.
Oh, wow. There really is not one area of my life that hasn't been touched since my transplant journey. If I'm going to be completely honest, I would choose transplant life any day over my previous life.
Huh. Okay. Explain that.
It was hard. It was very difficult. I'm not going to say that it wasn't, but it's so rewarding. I see things differently now, and I appreciate so many things. I just completed a virtual 5K race a few weeks ago. And I used to be a half marathon runner, so a 5K really used to be a warm-up for me. But to be able to take those steps now is so rewarding. I think back to all the days in hospital beds. And, you know, after transplant, I was so weak where I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair for weeks, and now I'm out running. It feels fantastic. And every time I am out on the trail, I think about all those hard days. And about, boy, if I would have known at that point on those really tough days that I would be out running on the trail again, it would have just really changed things for me. So I'm very grateful.
And I'm sure someone listening is going to realize that they too will be in your spot soon enough. We hear a lot about the fatigue. Was the fatigue real rough for you?
It very much was rough. I was already just so depleted the months leading up to transplant, just being so low on blood, where I couldn't do a flight of stairs without blacking out. So I was already pretty low to begin with. And then after transplant, I was very weak and I had so much fatigue. It was maybe 5 weeks I was in the wheelchair where I just didn't have enough strength to even walk. But, you know, slowly but surely, well, the first day, you know, we walked out to the end of the driveway and back, and then to the end of the street and back. So it's really focusing on getting in those steps as much as possible, especially on the days where you feel well, not overdoing it, but also trying to be as active as you can.
And being kind to yourself on the days that you're not feeling it. Was that hard for you to do as a mom? Were you able to take the breaks that you knew you needed?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't allow myself to take those breaks. I really pushed on, which of course then furthered the fatigue. So that's, I think, one thing, listeners, it's okay to take the breaks, to take the naps. Be good to yourself.
Yeah.
On the really hard days, another thing that I did is I would, before I went to bed at night, as I was saying my prayers, I would focus really hard on finding 3 good things that happened that day. Some days that was a challenge, but I could always find 3 because I knew for myself that if I was focusing on the negative, that was such a slippery slope for myself. So I do that even to this day. I'm still focusing on at least 3 things that went well for the day, 3 victories. So that's another thing that I believe in and I strive for each day.
Oh, Beth, it shows in your attitude. I wish that everyone could see your beautiful smile and just the energy that you bring forward. You are really something. Thank you so much for everything. Any parting words? I think you gave some great pearls. Anything else as we wrap this up?
One thing that my family and my caregivers and my friends, we tried hard to find some humor each day. I think it was Gilda Radner that said humor equals tragedy plus time. So we tried to keep things light and fun as much as possible. That really helped get us through on the hard days. Another thing, one of the small luxuries in the hospital is warm blankets. I feel strongly that if someone offers you a warm blanket, that you always take it. I told my husband, when we get home, we need one of those blanket warmers because it was the one thing that I always looked forward to on those hospital days was those warm blankets.
And did you get one when you got home?
He got me a heated blanket, so he's still pretty good to me. I'll take it.
Oh, that works. Oh, Beth. Well, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. And I want to stay in touch on your donor and the race car and everything else. Thank you.
Wonderful. It would be my pleasure to stay in touch with you, Peggy. And I just want to thank the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link for the opportunity to share my story with you today.
This has been the Marrow Masters podcast. If you know someone who would benefit from the information in our show, please share this episode with them. And don't miss future episodes of our show. Follow Marrow Masters for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. And to connect with the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, visit nbmtlink.org or tap the link in our show notes.